The Second World War is over. As the Italians rebuild their ruined towns and villages, a new cycling champion captures the imagination of the entire country, Fausto Coppi. His victories earn him the title Campionissimo, Champion of Champions. Coppi can achieve feats which appear superhuman while showing the human frailties of a mere mortal. He proves to his country, as it recovers from the trauma of the war, that physical strength and the desire to win can overcome any obstacles. Fausto Coppi enjoyed a winner's list second to none. His climbing feats in the Giro d'Italia especially left an unforgettable impression, not just on the Italians, but on the sporting world in general. Cycling has so many stars, but they fade with time. But Coppi is always with us because of what he won and the quality of his character. My feeling that he is still there is so strong that it wouldn't surprise me if I turned up at a race and met him.
Non mi meraviglierebbe di trovarlo, per dire, no? E mi dà questa impressione. Un uomo molto intelligente, parlava un francese.
Coppi was very intelligent.
Era molto intelligente ed era un timido che si difendeva.
He spoke perfect French. He was shy, but he was a true friend, and he would never let you down.
Si stava 10 ore, guarda, forse.
Coppi won by such huge margins at incredible average speeds and in such long breakaways. 140, 180 kilometers on his own. He had great mental strength as well, and he would train for hours and hours. Then he would come back home, eat dinner and go to bed. On the bike he had an evil streak, like all the greats. He would make you hurt for the joy of it, but off the bike, he was a great guy to be with. What sticks in my mind is how big a star he was. He was so popular. Wherever he went, all the fans would make him sign autographs all of the time. It just confirms what I've always believed about him. He had everything going for him. He was a nice guy. He had a certain aura about him. I don't know anyone who didn't like him. He was Italy's greatest last cyclist. We've had good bike riders since then, but they were all on top for only a short time. None have held centre stage like Coppi and Bartoli. Since then, there have been no great cyclists in Italy. Fausto Angelo Coppi was born into a peasant family on September 15, 1919 at Castagneria, in the hills of western Italy. At the age of 16, he was given his first bike. He rode it to deliver sausages for a butcher in a local town, Novi Ligure. The first person to recognize his potential as a cyclist was a blind masseur, Biagio Cavanna, who looked after a group of young cyclists. He taught young Fausto how to train, how to eat an athlete's diet, and how to rest. In 1937, aged 17, Coppi rode his first race. He punctured. Then the following year he took his first victory and was spotted by Italy's big star Gino Bartoli. We met after the Giro del Piemonte. We were riding around the track where the race finished and I mistook him for another rider, Primo Volpi, who I'd come up against in the Tour of Italy that summer.
Naturalmente io ero fatto il Giro d'Italia il più importante, appena arrivato il primo siamo andati là a salutarlo, oh bravo Volpi, io non lo so, mio Volpi, no.
Well, he said, I'm not Volpi. I come from Novi Ligure, and I'm called Coppi. 3 months later, Costante Girardengo, one of the best cyclists we ever had, came and told me he had found a super new rider. He simply flies, he said, and you must hire him for the team. Fausto Coppi was capable of dropping an entire field of riders and going on to win by himself. This man was a super champion, and he was clearly going to be a star. Fausto Coppi was very young, like I was in fact, but we signed him to my Legnano team in 1940. I could see his potential, but I had no idea that Fausto Coppi would turn into the greatest rival I was ever to have. A good performance in one of Italy's top single-day races at the Tour de Piedmont in 1939 led some to believe that Coppi might soon be a rival of Gino Bartali, his leader at the Legnano team. Next year, in the Tour of Italy, the Giro, Coppi came to the fore on the 11th stage from Florence to Modena. He broke away over the Abertoni Pass in central Italy, won the pink jersey of race leader, and held on to the finish with the help of Bartali. Well, after the end of the Giro d'Italia, the day after the race ended, the Italian dictator, Mussolini, declared war on Britain and on France. But before hostilities began, Coppi took another notable victory, the Italian track pursuit title. During the 1940 Giro, I shared a room with Fausto Coppi. He wore black socks, a sure sign that he had just come from the amateur ranks, where they wore black socks to save money, because white ones didn't last long with all the dirt from the roads back then. I remember joking that he would have to put on white ones if he won the pink jersey in the Giro d'Italia. Little was I to know that the joke was soon to be on me. He was a lad of 20, and he managed to win Italy's biggest race. But I remember near the end of that Giro, I overheard two journalists talking. One was Orio Vergani, who wrote for the daily Corriere della Sera. Vergani said, "When will it come?" And his friend answered, "It will probably be tomorrow." He was talking about the war.
Sente Vergani con una voce più preoccupata che dice quando sarebbe.
June 1940, Mussolini declares war. "We will win," he tells huge crowds in Rome. Like other young Italians, Coppi had to join the army. But even as the bombs fell, he managed to break cycling's toughest record, the unpaced hour on the Vigorelli Velodrome in Milan. No one expected Coppi to beat the record. We were at war, and he was supposed to save his strength to fight at the battlefront. He wore a woolen jersey with pockets. He rode a normal track bike. Fausto Coppi was unbelievable. He finished in such pain that he could hardly turn the pedals. You know, he could have used a higher gear, and maybe if he had done, he would have beaten the record by even a greater distance. Fausto Coppi was taken prisoner by the Allies in North Africa. But when he was released, he married his sweetheart from before the war, Bruna Ciampolini. His newfound peace came as the conflict ended for Italy. And with the country in ruins, the Italians needed new heroes now to divert their attention from hunger and misery. Fausto Coppi was soon to become their inspiration. He turned up at the opening one-day classic of 1946, Milan-San Remo, after putting in several thousand kilometers in training. He wanted to win alone and attacked from the start. When he reached the Torcino Pass, which crosses the Apennines from the plain of Lombardy to Genoa, only one rider was with him, Francis Lucien Tessier. He launched another assault and rode the next 147 kilometers in glorious solitude over the headlands of the Riviera coast. He left the fans delirious with joy. In San Remo, he was 14 minutes ahead of the Frenchman. It seemed as if the suffering of the war had simply made him even better. There was no doubt now Fausto Coppi had told the Italians the war was behind them and he was to be their new star. After a demonstration like this, no one doubted him. Just after the start, he attacked and he rode like a fury to the Turchino. Then he jumped away a second time and the others never saw him again. No one had done anything like that before. That evening, no one could talk about anything else. Fausto Coppi was the new star. I heard Armando Cugnet, the man who founded the Giro, saying that Coppi was going to be a huge star. Cugnet said, Fausto Coppi will bring glory to a very old sport. None of us could even imagine what he has done. If the sport can cope with someone who is so much stronger than the rest, we'll have a few interesting years. Cugnet was a very astute observer. Fausto Coppi in one Milan San Remo had demonstrated just what great talent he had.
E tutti lo dovranno imitare. Il ciclismo sopporterà questo carico, evidentemente l'ha sopportato per anni molto bene, però Coppi lo ha messo su questa strada.
The Giro of 1946, the first of the post-war era. A new rivalry is born. Gino Bartali, Coppi's former leader, has stayed with Legnano. Coppi has joined the Bianchi team. Italy's two greatest champions dominate the race from start to finish. Fausto beats Gino at Aronzo. Then the next day on the road to Bassano, Gino Bartali and Fausto Coppi were one-on-one, head-to-head. It was to become a familiar sight in world cycling, but then Coppi was going clear. Watched again by a huge crowd, Fausto Coppi was once more giving a demonstration of pure strength, even though he looked so frail. He was dispatching Gino Bartali to the back. Onto the track at Bassano, Fausto Coppi was winning again after leading on his own for 153 kilometers. But Fausto Coppi hadn't gained that much at Bassano. The rest, led home by Bartali, were only a minute back. When the Giro ended, Bartali was the winner, just 47 seconds ahead of Coppi.
Bartali, pur essendo più vecchio di lui, lo batté.
Bartali was the older man, but he beat Fausto, and that hurt Fausto a lot. He said people will believe that I should have stayed with him at Legnano instead of moving to Bianchi, and I'd really hate that. Perhaps if I'd stayed at Legnano, people will also say I might have won again, as I did in 1940. But I'll be back.
Per darle un'idea di cosa fosse l'Italia allora.
To give you an idea of how Italy was back then, the race seemed to be travelling through endless crowds of people in rags. In Italy, no one knew how to smile. As it was turning out, cycling was uplifting a very difficult time because of the effort the cyclists had to make. And Fausto Coppi and Gino Bartoli won races abroad as well to continue to boost the morale. They actually restored our pride in our country. During the war, no one knew if Coppi was dead or alive. But here he was, back again, riding like he always did. And there was the great rivalry. Coppi was the up-and-coming young man. Gino Bartoli was the old star, who was now in decline. But they were still great rivals. The year after, in the 1947 Giro d'Italia, battle was renewed between the two rivals almost as soon as the start flag was dropped. Coppi was in incredible form and left Bartoli trailing by the fourth stage. That stage had taken the riders from Reggio Emilia to Prato. Italy was still showing all of the scars of the Second World War, but the crowds were showing their allegiance to this great sport of cycling. Gino was bouncing back to take the stage to Pieve di Cadore in a sprint finish. Bartoli, like Coppi, was a proud man, and he certainly wasn't ready to take defeat lying down. But this stage marked the race's entry into the Dolomite Mountains in the north of Italy. It was here where Coppi attacked on the Falzarego Pass and began another long flight of lone cycling. He was taking a personal trip into the sport's history. He was in front for 150 kilometers, and won the pink jersey. He took it from Bartoli. Gino Bartoli could only tell the press how he had lost the lead in the Giro d'Italia to the young Fausto Coppi. The pair did a lap of honour together when the race finished on the Vigorelli cycling track in Milan. The main field, by tradition, finishing the Giro there. Fausto Coppi had won his second tour, 7 years after his first, with the World War in between. Bartoli almost 2 minutes behind. In the closing classic of the year, the Tour of Lombardy, the Race of the Falling Leaves, the weather was foul and cold, but that couldn't stop Coppi. He put in a typical lone attack 4 kilometers from the finish to win the Race of the Falling Leaves by a mere 40 seconds. The frail legs of Fausto Coppi had once again delivered the goods. Everywhere Coppi rode, the crowd turned out in their tens of thousands to see the Campionissimo at work. Fausto's daughter Marina was born that November. Perhaps that was what inspired him to dominate Milan-San Remo the following spring, in 1948. He did it in his usual style, winning by 5 minutes, and as before, he was mobbed by the finish. In that year's Giro, Coppi pinned all his hopes on the 2 stages through the great passes of the Dolomites. The first mountain stage finished at Cortina d'Ampezzo and was only 90 kilometers long. He was unstoppable, winning by over 3 minutes after 60 kilometers in the lead. The next day at Trento, he spent 148 kilometers in the lead, including the 2,600-meter climb of the Pordoi Pass. But there was a surprise, and at the finish, a new star, Fiorenzo Magni, had lost less than 3 minutes. He'd held on to the race lead, but Coppi's Bianchi team put in an official protest. They claimed that Magny had been pushed by fans. Magny was penalised, but Coppi's manager insisted the verdict was too lenient and withdrew the team, leaving Magny the winner. To add to Coppi's disgust, the team didn't start the Tour de France, and the world's toughest race was won by his old rival Bartoli, winner of no less than 7 stages at the ripe old age of 34. Coppi hated listening to the radio that summer. Fausto would say, "I couldn't go to the Tour de France," and he just kept on winning. He, of course, was Bartoli, and Fausto would say, "If I can't go to the Tour next year, then I'm going to stop racing." Fausto had been so frustrated to see his main rival take all the publicity in the top French race. All he wanted to do was to ride that race. But first, it was the 1949 Giro d'Italia. Magny was ill and stayed at home, but Bartoli was there, and so too, of course, was Fausto Coppi. And he was later to ride the Tour de France. As in the past, Coppi made his move in the Dolomites, stage number 11, between Bassano del Grappa and Bolzano. This stage crossed 3 great passes, the Rolle, the Podoi and the Sella. Bartoli had attacked first, but was caught by a chasing group when he punctured. Coppi made his move on the Podoi and won by almost 7 minutes. Then the race moved to the Alps for a stage which was to become legendary. Between Cuneo and Pinerolo, there were 5 daunting climbs: the Col de la Madeleine, the Col de Var, the Col d'Izoire, all in France, the Col de Montgenèvre, and the climb to Sestriere in Italy. Primo Volpi, the rider for who Bartoli had mistaken Coppi 10 years earlier, was the first to break away. Coppi followed him and left him for dead, and set off on one of the greatest escapes cycling has ever seen. Fausto Coppi raced 192 kilometers alone, crossing into Italy to win at Sestriere, where he was almost 12 minutes ahead of Bartoli. When the Giro finished, he was 24 minutes ahead of his great rival, and the cycling press and fans began to speculate. Could Coppi win both the Giro and the Tour de France, a feat which had never been done before? The fans of Italy were about to find out.
Quella tappa lì, diciamo, si saliva questo Col della Maddalena.
We were climbing the Madeleine, an awful road. Potholes were everywhere. I remember that Primo Volpi had attacked. Well, he was a good climber, so Coppi followed him. Perhaps he was nervous because it was too early in the stage to try such a serious move. There was still a long way to go. And when he'd left him, he had no reason to wait for us. Afterwards he said, "That damn fool Volpi made me work really hard today." And of course he hadn't meant to attack at all. He was almost angry, but he had achieved something which people still talk about today. And in fact, in 1992, another great Italian, Claudio Chiappucci, did a similar breakaway to win the stage in the Tour de France at Sestriere.
Era quasi arrabbiato di aver fatto un'impresa poi del genere, che anche oggi se ne parla.
When you look at the average speed and the conditions of the roads, you realize the scale of what Fausto Coppi really had done. A journalist had told me that he actually stopped for lunch. Coppi passed by while he was eating. When the starter came, they ate a main course, then they ate their dessert, and then they had coffee. And nobody else had gone past. And then Bartoli came by at the same time as the bill arrived. Two great rivals were now miles apart on the open highway. Fausto Coppi was clearly the best. Coppi was not the only star to start the Tour de France that hot summer. cameras were also out for Luis Mbobe, who was to win the race 3 times. And there too was the Swiss legend Ferdi Kubler, and of course the Italian rival Magni. As always, the Tour de France started in the Place du Palais Royal in Paris. And after the flag dropped, there was a long promenade through the capital to the suburbs where the race would begin. Fausto Coppi was looking for the double, something no one had ever done before. But disaster soon struck the Italian team. On stage 5 across Brittany to Saint-Malo, Coppi crashed. He broke the front fork of his bike and he had to wait for his spare machine, which was on the Italian team car, driven by manager Alfredo Binda. Bartoli, the previous year's winner and wearing number 1, was among the Italian team members who waited for Fausto Coppi, wearing number 4. The team almost had to push him to the finish, where he was 35 minutes behind the leader overall, Kubler, one of the big favourites. The Italian team had been dealt a cruel blow. Utterly demoralised now, the Italian Fausto Coppi wanted to quit the Tour. It seemed Brittany had already destroyed the hopes of the double, and Ferdi Kubler was now on top. Coppi not just had broken forks, he now had also broken morale.
La mia bici, che era sulla miraglia del tragella che doveva seguire il
My bike was on the first car, he had said, but we couldn't get the back wheel to fit in. We had to wait for the second car. 2 of us rode slowly up the road while Coppi changed his bike. Fausto caught us, and we rode up to the final group on the road. Suddenly, Fausto had disappeared again, so we waited once more. Fausto was saying, "I've had enough, I'm going home. It's too hot, and it's all over." We asked him to imagine how the Italian fans would react if he pulled out of the Tour de France just like that. But he insisted, "I can't go on." Fausto Coppi was now seeing the other side of a big-time bike race when bad luck means everything. His morale was affected by those broken forks. Even though the Tour de France had only just begun, he was now in a situation where he was having to fight back from afar. That's if he could even continue in the race. I was in the group with Coppi. We just kept losing time. It was 9, 10, then 11 minutes. I was trying to make the pace so we wouldn't be too far behind. But all Coppi would say was, "Let them go." If I'd have never come here, I would have been under a parasol somewhere with a nice cold beer in my hand. Already Fausto Coppi was thinking of abandoning the Tour de France. And his team couldn't do a thing about it. Gino Bartoli, his great rival and also his great friend. Fausto just said, "I'm going home. I can't handle this. It's simply too hard." I'd waited for him, and I asked him what on earth he was playing back. I'd won the Tour a year ago, and he just said, "Oh, go off, and just leave me alone. Leave me to it." Fiorenzo Magni. Fausto Coppi had fragile bones. He suffered several fractures in crashes, but his morale was also extremely fragile. When things were going well for him, he was completely unstoppable. But on that day, his head simply just went. The team had stopped to help him, so too had Gino Bartoli. So he shouldn't really have lost all that time.
perché si è demoralizzata con la
At the end of the stage, well, it really did look as though he had lost the Tour de France there and then.
Coppi è impossibile che possa vincere il Giro.
2 days later, Fausto Coppi began to fight back. In the time trial stage, the La Rochelle, he regained 8.5 minutes on the race leader, Marinelli. He was a great time trialist, and Fausto Coppi was refining his morale. Then in the Pyrenees, after Manu won at Pau and took the leader's yellow jersey, Coppi finished third on the stage to Luchon and climbed to 9th overall. He won the race in the Alps on the stage from Cannes to Briançon. Kubler attacked early on, followed by the 1947 Tour winner Jean Robic, and Bartoli and Coppi gave chase. Binder fired them all up with talk of national pride and the glory which awaited the team. The great rivals worked together. Fausto crashed, Gino waited, Bartoli punctured on the descent of the Col d'Izoire, and Coppi waited. And in Briançon, Coppi didn't fight for the stage win because it was his rival's birthday. Bartoli was in the yellow jersey, Coppi was second overall. The others, like Kubler, were broken men. Even the little Breton, Jean Robic, was beaten. Memory reduced to tears. They'd found a magical Fausto Coppi and a great Gino Bartoli. And the second Alpine stage was even tougher. Between Briançon and Aosta were the passes of Montgenèvre, Mont-Cenis, the Col d'Izoire and the little Saint-Bernard. Again, the two great rivals were in the thick of the action. Bartoli punctured, and like a good teammate, Coppi had waited for him. But he was struggling. Coppi didn't know whether to play the team game or work for himself until a motorbike brought a message from Binder. Look after yourself was the message. As a result, Coppi finished alone in Aosta, taking the maillot jaune for the first time in his career. Bartoli was second, but he was 5 minutes behind. Fausto Coppi had come back from being a broken man to the maillot jaune of the Tour de France. Bartoli, who'd finished 5 minutes behind, said, "I'd never seen anything like it. His will to win was so powerful. He could fall off, but would keep racing even if he was covered in blood and bruises. You know, I just couldn't go to those extremes." I was riding for the French national team in that tour, and I really hadn't found my feet. I was struggling. But Coppi just seemed to float along with hardly any effort. He was like an eagle in flight. I'd seen and raced against all the greats: Jacques Anquetil, Hugo Coblet, Eddy Merckx, Bernard Hinault, Miguel Indurain, and not one of them had looked as good as Fausto Coppi. On the bike, he was absolute perfection. He was very, very special.
Nessuno ha potuto far dimenticare l'immagine di Coppi in competizione.
Le cronometro, diciamo, di quel giro.
Coppi won the first time trial stage in that tour, and he also won the second one as well. I was almost dead by that part of the race. I could hardly eat anything. I felt good on the second time trial, but I lost 56 minutes to Fausto Coppi. That day, only 18 riders were within the time limit. The rest of us should have been disqualified, but they kept us all in because you couldn't have only 18 riders left at the end of the Tour de France. It really wouldn't have looked good, would it? Fausto Coppi was showing himself now to be head and shoulders above the rest of the best riders in the world. Fausto was like a train. He was just unbeatable. He was like a 12-cylinder Ferrari. There was nothing anybody could do. With the Alps behind him, Fausto Coppi sealed his victory with a dominating win in the time trial stage at Nancy. The Tour belonged to the man with the sad, mysterious face, austere and romantic at the same time. On the 24th July, the Tour ended at the Parc des Princes in Paris. Gino Bartali was second, and third was Marinelli. Marinelli had taken the lead on the day Coppi had almost abandoned. Fausto had gained almost a whole hour on him by the finish. No one had won the Tour de France and Giro d'Italia in the same year before, but Coppi had also won the World Track Pursuit title, the Italian National Championship, Milan-San Remo and the Tour of Lombardy. There was no doubt now in anybody's mind, especially if you were Italian, he certainly was the Campionissimo. These were new departures for Fausto Coppi. He was now a major celebrity and was voted the Italian Athlete of the Year. Not surprising, really. But when you become a top star, well, you have to put up with things like this. And like all top athletes, Fausto Coppi was showing signs of being slightly embarrassed.
Lui riusciva a fare 150 km da solo e aumentare.
In the Tour of Veneto in 1949, the same year, he was in the lead for 163 kilometres and opened a vast gap on the rest of us. There were half a dozen of us chasing him, including Magny and myself. It was 6-1, but Fausto Coppi was just pulling away.
L'abbiamo inseguito e di chilometro in chilometro guadagnato.
Yes, we got to within 150 metres of him, and we thought we were about to catch him. Then Fausto just changed into a higher gear and rode away from us all. There were 7 or 8 of us, but he was 5 minutes ahead of us when he got down to the finish. Fausto Coppi just simply didn't like riding with anybody else. He was just too strong, and he adored being alone in the lead, as he so often was. By 1950, Coppi had become the biggest sports star in Italy, idolised for his feats on the bike and much loved for his quiet nature and common touch. Fausto Coppi had shown himself to be unbeatable on both road and track, but fragile, a man from a poor rural background, he triumphed through sheer mental strength. He was well brought up, well mannered, but he never came out of his shell. He was a mystery. When you look at Gino Bartali, you could tell the mood he was in. You could tell exactly what he was thinking. But with Coppi, well, you would look and wonder, just what is he thinking? Is he on a good day or not? What exactly is he going to do? Fausto Coppi gave nothing away. He was totally unpredictable. And probably this was why he was such a great champion. Nobody could actually work him out at all. He made his own decisions. Paris-Roubaix is one of the toughest one-day classics, and in 1950 Fausto Coppi was the favourite, but the men to beat were the world champion Rik van Steenbergen and, of course, Magny. Magny had just won another great one-day race, the Tour de Flanders. Fausto Coppi was at the head of the line, dragging everybody along as they headed for the cobbles known as the Hell of the North. He had attacked at the feed zone and dropped the whole field except one rider who had held him, the Frenchman Guillou. He continued to set the pace. He needed no one to help him win Paris-Roubaix. He was looking for the first Italian victory since 1937. With the signs of the mining fields all around him, he came alone onto the velodrome in Roubaix, the very same velodrome which is used to this day, and watched over by hundreds of Italians who had emigrated to work in the mines of northern France. He had given them what they wanted: victory in the hardest single-day race of them all.
Una corsa tutta pianura, c'è solo dei falsipiani. Sì, c'è il pavé, d'accordo. Noi a 40 km all'arrivo.
Paris-Roubaix is all flat. There are no real hills. 40 kilometers from the finish, he was with me and Rick van Steenbergen. Honestly, I would say he wasn't strong on the flat, but I clearly recall how he rode away from us all on a tiny little rise. We were all going crazy, just trying to hold on to his wheel, and it was hopeless. Meter by meter, Fausto Coppi pulled away from us and just left us to watch. Coppi had shown he was equally as good on the flat as he was on the mountains. I remember that the rider who finished second in that Paris-Roubaix was quite happy. Why? "I've won," he said. Someone pointed out that he'd actually crossed the line in second place, and the response came, "Yes, but Fausto Coppi is in a league of his own." And so Fausto Coppi was now being viewed as a superhuman cyclist, which meant he didn't count at all. The crowds following cycling were now quite enormous, and they were all looking out for one man, Fausto Coppi. The year now is 1950. 15 teams started the Giro d'Italia, and for the first time a rider from outside of Italy would ride away with the overall victory. His name? Hugo Coblet. He would win. He'd finished ahead of Gino Bartali. But in the early days, Fausto Coppi was the rider to beat, of course. Wearing number 1 as winner of the previous year, the fans turned out to see how he would fare this time around. He was never far away from the head of the race. The roads of 1950 leaving a little bit to be desired, Fausto Coppi knew all about them. Riding his single gearing, he passed over the mountains always with the leaders. But this wasn't to be his tour at all. Fausto Coppi was in difficulty. He crashed. He was out of the Giro d'Italia. His career was marked by serious accidents, and whenever Fausto Coppi fell, he always broke something. This time, his pelvis in 3 places.
Il gruppo procedeva compatto.
Rino Negri had been fortunate to work through all of the great years of Fausto Coppi, and he recalled the incident as clear as the day. He said the group was riding along together when a rider called Pederelli, whose eyesight wasn't very good, moved to one side without giving any warning. Fausto Coppi fell, and he didn't get up. The bunch at the time was being led by Hugo Coblet, who didn't want to attack him while he was down, so he continued to lead the race slowly. But then the race director, Ambrosini, came up and told them Coppi's been taken to hospital. Then some bright spark went to the front of the bunch and yelled, "Let's get a move on, because Fausto Coppi's likely to get out of his bed and catch us." Even for Fausto Coppi, though, that was impossible.
Aveva cuore splendido, una capacità che allora si chiamava.
Coppi had a splendid pair of lungs, but his bones were like glass.
Tanto che le ossa erano di cristallo.
If Fausto fell off, he was bound to break something.
Abbiamo fatto il calcolo delle fratture.
I actually think it helped in the long term.
La sola cosa che non hai rotto.
The time Fausto had to spend in hospital and off the bike regaining strength simply meant that he could recover, so that when he came back, he was even fitter than before.
La sua attività era tale.
It helped with his powers of recuperation. Coppi never over-raced because of his crashes.
Le fratture, le convalescenze lo ricaricavano perché gli permettevano di riposare.
Era un corridore che se cascava si rompeva.
Coppi was a great rider, but yes, he was vulnerable mentally and physically.
Era un grande atleta fragilissimo.
If Lady Luck smiled on him, then of course he was unbeatable. But you know, if he suffered a crisis, then his strength could easily desert him. Even this great champion was fallible.
Era umanamente un uomo accattivante.
Coppi was placed in room number 20 of the St. Clair Hospital in Trento. And it was there his wife and daughter came to visit, and he could enjoy the family life while he missed his racing. Coppi was hardly a man prone to putting on weight, so he simply gathered his strength, ready for the day when he could begin racing again. That summer he trained along the western coastline with his beloved brother Cersei, who also rode on the Bianchi team, and with his faithful domestique, Sando Carria. After 4 months out, he began racing again.
Quando d'inverno si allenava in Riviera,
when he trained in the winter on the Riviera coast, we often had teammates to stay with us.
Al mattino, mentre facevo colazione,
Fausto would come down to breakfast and talk about his training, and then he'd read the paper, and then he'd put it under his jersey to keep him warm.
Per strapparlo, per farsi lo scollo, poi se lo metteva sotto la maglia, e intanto ero seduta a tavola.
He would even take my spoon and eat bits of my breakfast if he was still hungry. Coppi couldn't wait to get back into the saddle.
Movimentava sempre un po' la mia colazione e la sua partenza.
Fausto Coppi started the Tour of Lombardy that autumn determined to destroy the opposition. The race on this occasion starting outside of Milan's famous cathedral. And of course, Fausto Coppi knew the race route like the back of his hand. He waited for the climb to the Madonna del Gisallo. Then he attacked. Few could hold the pace he set. And those who could wouldn't be there for long. One by one, they dropped away. But perhaps he wasn't quite back to his old form, because one by one they caught him up again. There were still those who would resist Fausto Coppi. But was it to matter? Fausto Coppi didn't seem to care. He continued to set the pace. As the race came into the finish, it ended in a four-man sprint. And just as the quartet were winding up for the finish, a chasing group entered the track. Coppi had to slow down and was robbed of the chance to win the Race of the Falling Leaves for the 5th year running. But his feat had earned him the title Campionissimo, the champion of champions, an accolade bestowed on only the greatest Italian cyclists, and some of his greatest victories were yet to come. 5 years had passed since the World War ended. Gino Bartoli was still a great rival of Fausto Coppi, but the pair could still laugh at each other as they sang songs together.
No. È tutto da rifare qua, è tutto da rifare.
Vai, vai. Da capo, non vi preoccupate, da capo, su, pronti, vai.
C'eravamo tanto amati per 20 anni poco più.
C'eravamo pintecchiati sui giornali e alla TV.
Però un giorno ci incontrammo quale scherzo del destin,
perché insieme riparammo presso il Santo Pellegrin.
appinati i ghiribizzi siamo vinti io e te,
Come lei è la pizzi.
come zucchero e caffè.
Ed io ripenso a quel tempo lontano, le nostre lotte sui monti e sul piano, e sulle Alpi coperte di nevi.
Come perdevi, come perdevi.
Ti ricordi quella volta che tu atteso a San Malò?
Di memoria non ne ho molta, non ricordo proprio no. Mi ricordo viceversa che t'ho spinto sulla Spen.
La memoria anch'io l'ho persa, non me lo ricordo bene.
Che dirai mio comandante nel vedermi pedalar?
Ti dirò seduta stante che è tutto da rifare.
Giri d'Italia ne ho vinti tanti, senza mai prendere droghe eccitanti.
Giri d'Italia lui si li vinceva, ma le prendeva, oh se le prendeva.
Fummo rivali però cordialmente, fummo nemici ma sempre realmente. L'antagonismo che ci divideva, come piaceva, come piaceva.
Adesso un'altra cosa.
In 1951, fate again had the better of Fausto Coppi. In March of that year, at the finish of Milan-Turin, he crashed and broke his collarbone. After 2 months without riding his bike, he started the Tour of Italy in poor form. Victory in the time trial stage and Perugia to Terni was not enough. In the mountains, he was unable to hold on to the pink leader's jersey, and he finished fourth, 4 minutes behind Fiorenzo Magni. So, with the 1951 Giro d'Italia behind him, there was worse to come. On June 29th, a tragedy struck. A few hundred meters from the finish of the Tour de Piedmont, Coppi's brother Serse fell and hit his head. 2 hours later, he collapsed in his hotel and he died later that evening in hospital. The loss of his younger brother, who meant so much to him, made Fausto want to give up cycling. Fausto was so fond of Serse, and Serse was the same of Fausto. It was very hard for him to lose his brother in a race in that way, in a crash. And afterwards, he didn't want to go to the Tour de France. But if he had not started that race, he might have broken down and stopped racing altogether. He said he was going to give up racing, but Cavana, myself and some others told him he must go on.
diversa gente dice, guarda,
Look, we said, tragedies happen to all of us, to anyone.
guarda, continua,
What
perché
happened to
purtroppo
Cersei
le
could happen to
disgrazie
any of us too.
succedono a tutti, a chiunque, quindi giusto.
If you stay at home,
Disgrazia del
it will mean
fratello,
only the
in
worse.
corsa, puoi sempre pensare,
Fausto's
se
wife,
succede
Bruna, was the
sempre
only
anche a
one
noi,
who wanted
così,
him to give
quindi
up cycling.
cerchiamo,
Everybody
anzi,
else wanted him to
cambiamo, perché
continue.
sennò è peggio, ma lui niente, poi
And he
si è
did.
convinto sia da giornalisti che da mio suocero e chiese tutto, l'unica la Bruna che lei insisteva che non corresse più.
When Fausto Coppi turned up at the start of the Tour de France that year, he was a mental wreck. He made no excuses before the start, saying, "I'm simply not in form." The race started on July the 4th, just 5 days after his brother's Cersei's death. Coppi went through one of the toughest days in his career on the stage across southern France from Carcassonne to Montpellier. He finished almost 45 minutes behind the winner, the Swiss rider Hugo Coblet. The only bright spot came in the Alps, where he broke away on the stage to Briançon and took a typical lone victory. Hugo Coblet rode out the winner from Raphael Geminiani. Fausto finished 10th, some 47 minutes behind. But after his threats to retire, he had salvaged something from the wreckage of his year. Fausto Coppi was still in everybody's eyes a champion.
Sì, chiamiamola staccotta, ma per me in particolare.
I think the trouble he had in that tour was only partly due to his brother's death. Every day at the stage finish at Gino Bartoli's Soigneur would give him 6 eggs to help him recover. In fairness, you know, I really don't think his liver could cope. But even so, he did eat them.
Una giornata forse 45 gradi all'ombra. Lui,
if Fausto had a weakness, it was that he was not always able to handle the hot weather. One day on that tour it was 45 degrees in the shade and he fell to bits.
L'importanza di Coppi a questo giro, il grande Godet che è stato per me uno dei più
You know, Coppi should really have finished outside of the tour time limit that day, but the race organizer, Jacques Godet, stopped the group which was riding ahead of him.
Ha fermato un gruppo davanti, il gruppo ha aspettato Coppi, allora hanno allungato il tempo.
Jacques actually made them wait for him. Then they worked together to finish within the cut-off point, and consequently they all stayed in the race.
Era disastrato, poverino. Ha cominciato ad andare e ha vinto una grande corsa sulle Alpi.
After 5 days of riding in the Tour de France, Fausto Coppi was just a shadow. He really could eat hardly nothing at all. But then he recovered, and he won the toughest stage in the Alps. Fausto Coppi was back, and he was showing once more his incredible class. He'd gone from death's door to once again being a great bike rider. Paris-Roubaix 1952 was a real test for Fausto Coppi, who was now 32 and a half. Only one rider could withstand him, the great Belgian cyclist Rik van Steenbergen. He was one of the finest sprinters of the time, and when he reached the finish with Coppi, the Campionissimo had to be content with second place. There were very few who could beat Rik 1 in a sprint finish. As the great Geminiani explains, the French were almost more crazy about Coppi than the Italians themselves. There were Bartoli fans and Coppi fans like in Italy. The French loved Bartoli because he was a man of the earth. But Fausto had something more. They even preferred Fausto Coppi to the great Breton Louis Mbobet, who at the time was their best rider on home soil. Bobet was to win the Tour de France 3 times in succession. The Giro d'Italia started on May 17 with a superb field including Kubler, Koblet, Magny, Bartoli and Coppi. His first target was the 5th stage, which was a mountain time trial near Rome. Italians love their cycling. They attended the Giro d'Italia in their tens of thousands. They still expected Coppi and Bartoli to be the men to beat. Of course, he won the time trial, but the pink jersey remained on the shoulders of Giancarlo Astrua, who had finished second. Astrua held the lead for another 4 days. Then Coppi took over on the stage to Venice and went into the Dolomites as the race leader. Coppi had achieved great things amongst their rocky outpeaks before, and he did so again now. One by one, he destroyed the opposition. After riding alone for 80 kilometers over the Podoi and the Sella passes, he finished 5 minutes ahead of his old rivals, Bartoli and Magny in Bolzano. He was treating the crowd to another great display by the Campionissimo of the sport. He was heading now to an overall race lead in excess of 8 minutes. He was back to his best.
Aveva il carriera davanti che ti faceva la sua solita andatura.
I remember we were climbing a mountain at a steady pace one day. Fausto Coppi was pedaling smoothly as usual, and I felt fine. He changed gear. He kept pedaling at the same speed, and I still felt I could hang on. Then he went up a gear again, and again his rhythm didn't change. Suddenly, the group was in absolute tatters. We all blew to bits. Coppi kept on going. We all dropped away. But I can tell my children, I rode alongside Coppi and was a witness to his incredible talent. Fausto Coppi was still a man bigger than any other cyclist in the world.
E gli altri poco per volta si vede che avranno fatto ugualmente o si saranno staccate perché lui è arrivato qui solo. Quindi io ho conosciuto Coppi, questa grandezza del corridore Coppi.
Coppi took his 3rd stage win in the time trial from Erba to Como. He was virtually unopposed, with Koblet and Astrua way behind. The final stage to Milano was like a Sunday outing, with Magny almost 10 minutes behind overall. Not surprisingly, the fans began to wonder if he could manage a second double of victories in both the Tour de France and the Giro d'Italia. To normal spectators, Fausto Coppi seemed an unbeatable machine. To the bike riders, they were in no position to disagree. They couldn't get near him. As far as they were concerned, the race was always for the 2nd place. The way things worked, you had to ask the top riders for permission if you wanted to break away, even if you weren't dangerous in the great scheme of things. Well, I asked Coppi if I could try to win at Cuneo, and he said if I dared to attack, the whole peloton would gang up on me and I would never win a race again. Anyway, next day, I did attack on a climb. The whole Bianchi team were there, including Fausto Coppi, and I left them all for dead, and I won. Well, I'll tell you what, that evening, Fausto Coppi came over to me and said I was the only real new star the Giro had produced, and I'll never forget those words. To hear such words from the great Fausto Coppi was a claim indeed.
E da quel giorno lì siamo diventati amici. E da quel giorno lì ho dato del tu come se l'avessi sempre conosciuta.
E lui mi dice, guarda Raffaele, se io vinco il Giro d'Italia e se
I remember Fausto saying, even if I win the Giro, if Bartoli takes the King of the Mountains, everyone will say he had a good race and they'll forget about me. There was one mountain left on the final stage and he made me attack to take the points at the top. I won the Mountains Prize. Bianchi won the Teams Award, and of course Fausto Coppi won overall. So we all had plenty to celebrate that night. Geminiani, one of the few Frenchmen to make the grade alongside the great Fausto Coppi. He was often known as the clown of the team, his great morale keeping everybody in high spirits all of the time. The build-up to the Tour de France was marred by arguments between Bartoli and Coppi over the makeup of the Italian squad. There was even a risk that the Italian national team would not even start the event. But eventually Alfredo Binda ruled that Coppi should take 3 teammates from Bianchi, while Bartoli and Magni could have 2 each. Bartoli even agreed to work for Coppi. Coppi was also in incredible form after taking less effort than he had expected to win the Giro d'Italia. Bobe, Kubler and Jean Robic hadn't started the event, and after 5 days, Magni took the yellow jersey at Namur in Belgium. Coppi began his bid for a second double when he won the 60-kilometre time trial at Nancy, in spite of 2 punctures. That year, the Tour paid its first visit to the now legendary stage finish at l'Alpe d'Huez. Sando Carrier, one of Coppi's most loyal domestiques, was in the yellow jersey, but he didn't last long. Robic was the last man to stay with Fausto Coppi on the climb to Alpe d'Huez. Coppi won alone in front of a huge crowd and claimed the maillot jaune. It was 20 years before the Tour de France would climb this mountain again. So Fausto Coppi was now the yellow jersey of the Tour de France. He'd done it in the Alps. The next stage took the race into Italy, across the Sestriere, still in the Alps, site of one of Coppi's greatest exploits in 1949. These are the halcyon days of cycle racing, on roads barely fit to drive a car along. The greatest bike riders in the world were racing through the Alps. Fausto Coppi took his second stage win in as many days in glorious solitude. He was now 7 minutes ahead. But after the stage finish, a French photographer was witness to a bitter argument between the Campionissimo and his wife Bruna. Their marriage was on the rocks. Another woman had stolen Coppi's heart, Giulia Occhini, the White Lady. But even if life was chaotic personally, as a team, the Italians were in total harmony. Even when Coppi punctured on the stage to Monaco, it was Bartoli who gave him his wheel. In the Pyrenees and the giant Col de Tourmalet, Coppi was again the winner. The tour was almost over. Fausto Coppi was still very much in control. But before the finish, one mountain was still left, the Puy de Dôme in central France. Bartoli never far away from the Campionissimo, keeping an eye on him. One man up the road, though, was Nolten, the Dutchman. He led onto the Puy de Dôme. The Puy de Dôme is a volcano extinct, a mountain to nowhere. When you get to the top, the tour stage finishes. Then you freewheel down again. Nolten began to crack. And the man to reach him, Fausto Coppi. Coppi kept the pressure on just long enough to crack the Dutchman. There was no doubt now who was the best man in this Tour de France. At the top of the Puy de Dôme, Fausto Coppi was the winner. And the others could only tell their tales. The Puy de Dôme was not tarmac back then, so it really was a hard mountain. When the three of us came to the bottom of the climb, we'd been in front for 50 kilometers. We were really tired, and in fact almost came to a standstill. I can remember the mountain. You can see it for many, many miles around you. It stands out in the Massif Central. Then Nolten, the Dutchman, attacked. I tried to go with him. I was 20 or 30 meters behind him. But you know, that's a long way on a climb like the Puy de Dôme. It takes an awful lot of effort to close such a gap. And then Coppi passed me going like a thunderbolt. I really think he was going twice as fast as I was. It was supernatural, the speed he was going. His bike didn't seem to touch the road. He just shot by me. And of course, after that, he chased Nolten, and he passed him too. It was unreal how anybody could ride like he did on a bicycle. He just went over the road so quickly. Well, 2 days later, the Tour de France ended at the Parc des Princes in Paris. Coppi had won his second and last Tour, taking the double again with the Giro d'Italia. The Italian team won 7 stages, the overall and the mountain prize with Coppi, and the award for the best national team as well. Not bad for a squadra which had looked on as if it wasn't going to make the start at all. The whole team had reason to celebrate. It was made up of bitter rivals. They'd come together as one. They'd eclipsed the Tour de France as one. In cash terms, it was a good year for me, okay. We all had to work really hard for Fausto Coppi in the Giro, and then again in the Tour. But you know, he never took a single lira of his prize money. Fausto was that sort of cyclist. He always thought of his teammates, and he always divided his money equally among the team and the staff. Well, Coppi was the most French of all of the Italian riders. They loved him because he could dig so deep. You know, he was so very professional. Even if he was riding a small invitation race, perhaps on the track, he would race it the right way, giving all of his effort, holding nothing back, giving the crowd their value.
Sia a Parigi, questo lo so.
You know, at one stage he even thought of living in
Si
Paris.
trasferì a Parigi.
Coppi spent the winter of 1952 in Sestriere with his wife and daughter. It was one of the last happy times of their marriage. But behind the smile was the sadness, which was perhaps his only true companion all through his life. Soon Coppi would leave his family to live with the lady they called the Dame Blanche, the White Lady. It was something, in fact, one didn't do in Catholic Italy. In 1953, when the Giro began, Coppi was in relaxed mood, even though his marriage was over and he'd begun a new life. Even at 33.5 years old, he was still very competitive. This year, Coble was the big rival. Not surprisingly, though, all of the support in Italy was for Fausto Coppi, the Campionissimo. In the Dolomites, he attacked and attacked hard. Coble had led over the Pudoi Pass, but Fausto was still willing to push home any advantage he could find. The pair at times proved inseparable. Into Bolzano, and Coppi was still locked in battle with Coble. But at the line, Fausto was the winner. But even though Coppi had won, the Swiss still held a minute's lead overall. The next day, the Giro went over a new climb, the terrifying Stelvio Pass, almost 3,000 meters high. Coppi was not keen to attack because Coble had let him win the day before, but he knew that the Swiss was not at his best at such high altitude. Coppi did attack, and Coble cracked. Fausto Coppi was once again on his playground, and his form was uncontrollable yet again by the top riders of the world. On this occasion, he even gained time on the descent, where the Swiss rider cracked twice. At the finish, he was almost 3.5 minutes ahead, and he'd won his 5th Giro, and it was to be his last. Coppi didn't ride the Tour de France, but he was there in civilian clothing at the roadside on the Izoard Pass. He was cheering on people like Louis and Bobet with Julia at his side. A photographer captured the moment, and conservative, church-going Italy was outraged. The World Championship was on August the 30th in the Swiss town of Lugano. Coppi knew it was probably his last chance to win the rainbow jersey, which he had always wanted. The whole Italian team was dedicated to working for him, and the circuit was lined with fans who were praying that their idol could produce yet another miracle. And the miracle came to pass. There were no fewer than 5 Italians in the decisive break of 18 riders. Coppi set the pace on the climb of the Crespera, and only one rider eventually would stay with him. He would be the Belgian Dierix. Dierix hung on for another 70 kilometers. It was a grim show of defiance by Dierix, and Coppi didn't even mind him being there. He continued to set the pace. Of course, the inevitable happened. Fausto attacked again and was to win by over 6 minutes. When he crossed the line, he was overjoyed, lifting his hand in a victory salute, which was something he rarely did. On the podium, a lady wearing somber attire presented him with flowers. And yes, it was the White Lady, appearing for the first time alongside her Fausto in front of millions of television viewers.
Io sono scappato i primi 3-4 giri. È stata una fuga di 3 minuti.
I attacked early on in that World Championship. I took 3 minutes lead and was caught by Coppi and his team. When he attacked on the Crespera, I couldn't hold him. He was too strong.
Io non può seguire, andavo troppo forte.
Campionato del mondo e quello era proprio.
He had made up his mind that he was going to win the world title. The course was perfect for him, and off he went. Yes, for a while a Belgian marked him, but he couldn't hold his pace, and in the end Fausto Coppi just left him. Yet again, Fausto Coppi had shown when he makes his mind up, he can achieve almost anything. He'd wanted this world title, and he got it. I remember on the finishing podium, standing just a few feet away from the president of cycling's governing body, the Union Cycliste Internationale, was the White Lady, Signora Occhini. And she was the one who pushed the flowers forward to Fausto Coppi. Well, there are those who say that the White Lady ruined Coppi, and there are those who say that she rebuilt his morale, which had been ruined for various reasons. I believe I'm the only journalist who says that he committed a basic mistake in leaving his wife and his child. And you know, I said this to him, and he replied, "Do you mean that you've never been in love?" Our image of Coppi is of a single rider pitting his strength against a mountain or against the clock, winning great tours and classics on the road. But you know, he was a great track rider as well, winning 5 Italian titles and 2 world titles on the track. When he turned up at a meet, there was always a full house. In the winter of 1953, Coppi devoted himself to track racing after winning the Baracchi Trophy 2-man time trial. Coppi was so versatile, he could do anything. Wearing his rainbow jersey of World Road Racing champion, he could show the track riders how to ride in their domain as well. There was no limit to the talents of Italy's famous all-rounder, and he loved entertaining the public. And more importantly, perhaps, they loved watching him.
Parlando con I suoi colleghi, parlando con I ragazzi che correvano con lui.
Talking to his teammates, Coppi was clearly loved for his generosity.
Lui vinceva una grande corsa, guadagnava dei premi perché già allora.
He won plenty of prize money in all of the great races, but he always left it to his domestiques, his helpers. He knew he could make a killing in appearance money after the events were over. He could make plenty of money as well in the circuit races, where they wanted the winner of the yellow jersey or the pink jersey of the big tours. You know, in 1955 and 1956, he was pulling in 500,000 to 600,000 lira. Coppi was one of the greatest track pursuit riders we'd ever seen. I rode about 100 pursuit races. That's about 50,000 kilometers in total. Coppi was an incredible crowd puller. They used to say that in Paris only politicians like General de Gaulle got bigger crowds, but you could see them for free. You had to pay to watch Coppi, and there were still enormous crowds. In 1954, Coppi was again struck by bad luck, as so often happens to cycling's world road champion in their current year as the champion. The Giro was won by Giancarlo Clerici. Fausto suffered from stomach trouble. he'd lost the race early on. But even so, he won the first stage in the Dolomites. This was his favourite countryside of the Tour de France, and once again he didn't let the fans down. But he wasn't to win the race overall. The very next day, on the road to St-Moritz, the riders went on strike and covered the stage at an average of only 24 kilometres an hour. So Fausto Coppi lost his chance to win overall and was to finish only 4th. At St-Moritz, he was visited by Giulia, and the two lovers decided to move to Riviera. But on July 7, while he was out training in the south of Milan, a lorry lost a wheel and hit him, leaving him with leg injuries. Coppi said at the time, "I'd like to thank all of the fans for taking an interest in my accident. The doctors haven't told me when I'll be back on my bike, but I hope it'll be in only a couple of weeks' time, so that I can again do well in the World Championships." By this time, Fausto Coppi was used to serious injury. He was equally used to coming back fighting fit and winning again. But this time, it was not to be. Still a superstar in everyone's eyes, on August 22nd, Coppi was riding the world title at Solingen in Germany when he fell on the wet road, suffering cuts and bruises to his spinal column. In the Tour of Lombardy, he was back in a Bianchi jersey. As Coppi raced, the police were arresting Giulia for deserting her husband. But Coppi didn't know this as he pulled off a surprise win. Final big classic of the season neared the end, Coppi was unaware of the drama unfolding around him. He didn't win too many group sprints, but he certainly got the better of Magny in this one. And this was his 5th win in the Tour of Lombardy and his last major victory. Once again, Coppi had recovered from serious injury to great victory. The winter of 1954-55 was one of the toughest in Coppi's life. On March 13, he and Giulia were given suspended prison sentences of 2 and 3 months respectively, and the White Lady was expecting a child. He would be born in Argentina, the only way that little Faustino would bear his father's name.
La cosa di Coppi che non mi piacque.
The thing I didn't like about Coppi was what happened when he was taken to court for deserting his wife. His defense wasn't convincing.
Secondo me era un Coppi già da tempo che era rimasto, diciamo, come si dice in gergo.
Fausto flannelled, but as it was suggested to him after the tribunal, perhaps the judge had been easier on him than would have been expected, because the White Lady was pregnant with Coppi's son at the time of the trial.
Forse messo in soggezione dal pubblico ministero e dallo stesso presidente del tribunale, ai quali
Catholic Italy had taken a stern view of the fact that Fausto Coppi had left his wife and his daughter to marry someone else and now have her child as well.
Era in attesa della nascita di Faustino ed era stata giustificata, e quindi lo bersagliarono veramente.
Coppi in 1955 decided to continue racing even though he was now 36 years of age. The Giro that year began 2 days after the birth of Faustino, and the new star was Gastone Nencini. Nencini held the lead until the day before the finish. The winning break formed, Nencini punctured. Magny was in the move and asked Coppi for help. They had a tacit agreement. Fausto would take the stage, Magny the overall win. The Campionissimo was only 13 seconds behind. His power was waning, but it was a slow process yet. Three months later, Giulia came back to Italy with little Faustino, and Coppi marked the occasion with his last epic road race win in the Giro del Appennino. He was once again at his brilliant best, winning alone. And with Faustino not very far away from his side, later in the season he also took the Three Valleys of Varese time trial. Winning his fourth Italian national title, and he ended the year with victory in the Baracchi Trophy. On this occasion he was teamed with Riccardo Filippi. Fausto Coppi, Italian champion, was still the biggest crowd puller around.
Ero tifosissimo di Fausto, per me Fausto era un gigante.
I was a complete Coppi fan. He was a giant on the athletic and human scale.
Appena ebbi modo di incontrarlo, io entrai in televisione nel 53, alla fine.
I remember meeting him soon after I started working in television.
Timidamente gli chiesi se mi poteva fare un autografo.
After I interviewed him for the first time in 1953, I asked shyly if I could have his autograph. At the end of 1955, we broadcast a circuit race in Trieste. The first time we had done that, Fausto Coppi came to me and said that he had more fan mail from that race than from any of the great international events. Even Paris-Roubaix, all of them, Tour of Lombardy. That one little race in Trieste had created more interest. The start of 1956 saw the end of an era. Coppi stopped racing in the blue and white Bianchi jersey in which he had taken all of his greatest victories. Coppi wanted now to make his own bikes, and he started his 11th Giro d'Italia in the white jersey of Capano Coppi. But yet again his luck deserted him. During the stage to Rimini, he crashed and dislocated his Achilles tendon, and he had to take 2 months' rest. But there was one consolation. He was able to spend the time off with his beloved Giulia and their son, Faustino. The day before the crash, we were riding along chatting, and I asked him why he kept on racing when he had earned 100 times as much as I had. Well, he responded, "You know, life is so complex," and he said it with a sadness. "I really feel I have to race just to clear my head." Fausto Coppi had been a great champion, but he had led such a complicated life.
Posso dire che Coppi aveva qualcosa di estremamente rapinoso.
There was something destructive in Coppi's character. I think he was born to suffer. He didn't just suffer as all cyclists do, but he suffered in every area of his life. Things happened to him which didn't happen to everyday people. He crashed, he broke bones, his love life was a scandal, his marriage hit the rocks.
Sua moglie che giaceva con lui diventava adulterio, il figlio nasceva a Buenos Aires, e tutti li deprecavamo, dall'altra parte c'era Barta di Pio, e Coppi, ripeto, era un parafulmine etico per tutti.
All Coppi ever wanted was to be left alone to race. In 1956, in the Tour of Lombardia, he made the selection on the Gisallo as usual. His pace was, as always, relentless. It was Magnier who led the chase. Even though the race fragmented, there was a large group contested the finish, and Coppi was out-sprinted by André Darragard, who won by a tyre's width. Things didn't improve the following year. Coppi broke his femur in a circuit race in Sassari on March the 1st and had to follow the Giro in a car. That autumn, aged 38, he rode the Baracchi Trophy with Ercole Bordini, the world hour record holder. Fausto wasn't in form, and he could barely hold on to Baldini's wheel. But even though Baldini punctured, he was still able to drag Coppi to what would be the final win of his career.
A un certo punto io ho bucato una gomma e...
At one point I punctured and stopped to change the wheel. Rather than waiting, Coppi kept going pretty quickly, so I had quite a lot of trouble catching him again. It took me quite a few kilometers. When people saw him in front, they'd assumed he'd left me behind. So of course his fans were wild with joy. My fans were mad because they thought I was struggling. In fact, it was the other way around, I think. I was with Coppi after a few kilometers of chasing and rode as fast as I could, but he never asked me to slow down, and we won by a few seconds. Even when Coppi was tired, you couldn't really tell, because of course he knew how to suffer. In 1959, Coppi won 2 minor races, but he settled into life with Giulia. He continued to entertain the crowds at his favorite event, the time trial, even though now he was 40 years of age. At the end of the season, he rode the Baracchi Trophy again, with another great of the period, the Triple Tour de France winner, Louis Mbobé. It was more a lap of honor than a real race. Once the cycling season ended, Coppi was able to indulge his other great passion, shooting. He was invited on a trip to North Africa for a few short circuit races and, of course, a couple of shoots. As deadly with a gun as he was with a bicycle, Coppi flew back to Italy on December the 18th. And by December 27th, he felt tired and called a doctor. The doctor diagnosed flu. In fact, he had malaria.
Sono caduto nel coma.
I was on the same trip, and I caught the same disease as Coppi, and I went into a coma. When I recovered, someone told me that Coppi was ill as well. So my brother called his doctor and suggested that perhaps he had malaria like I had. But you know, the doctor said, "You look after your brother, let me deal with Fausto Coppi." Of course, malaria can be treated with quinine. And maybe, just maybe, if Coppi had been given some in time, then he would still be with us. He died because he was not properly looked after.
Io curo Coppi per quello che ha. Era stesso male. Se lui fa la chinina, forse Coppi sarebbe con noi perché aveva una salute e perché non poteva morire così. È morto perché è stato mal curato.
Sono andato la sera, l'ultimo dell'anno.
I went to see him on New Year's Eve, and he had a temperature of 38.5 degrees. Malaria can cause a fever of 41.5. You know, I called the white lady and said, "Could it be malaria?" She replied, "It can't be."
Chiamiamola dama bianca come volete. Io ero in camera, gli ho detto a un dottore, ma non sarà mica la malaria? E lui gli ha risposto, vorrei che fosse malaria.
Fausto Coppi was taken to a nearby hospital where he died at 8:45 on the morning of January the 2nd, 1960. The people's champion, the champion of champions, Fausto Coppi, was dead, and he had died in such tragic circumstances which could have been prevented. But many would say his destiny was always to be this way.
La sua ambizione era una sola.
Coppi had one great ambition, building bikes on his own account under the Coppi name. But he also wanted to form a team in Tortona to bring on promising young cyclists. Perhaps the great Fausto hadn't forgotten how he himself started as a youngster, riding on the team of Gino Bartoli.
Un collegio del corridore.
Ma non sembrava vero, non sembrava vero che un uomo della sua grandezza.
It didn't seem real to me. It didn't seem possible that someone of his stature could go just like that.
È come se
People love Coppi, and they still love him, because he was more than a mere cyclist. Fausto Coppi had real human strengths and real human weaknesses.
Aveva visto in lui, oltre che il campione, anche tanta umanità.
Io penso sempre un giorno vedere Coppi.
I always think that one day I'll see Coppi again. To me, I feel that he's not really dead. I think it's a joke, and I will see him again, and we'll have a bottle of good wine and a plate of spaghetti. I've been thinking that way for almost 40 years. I just can't believe that he really has gone from us.
So che un sogno così non ritorni mai più. Mi ritingevo le mani e la faccia di blu. Poi d'improvviso venivo dal vento rapito e incominciava a volare nel cielo infinito. Volare, oh, cantare, oh, nel blu dipinto di blu, felice di stare lassù. E volavo, volavo felice più in alto del sole ed ancora più su, mentre il mondo pian piano spariva lontano laggiù. Una musica dolce suonava soltanto per me. Volare, oh, cantare, oh, nel blu dipinto di blu, felice di stare lassù. I sogni dell'alba svaniscono perché quando tramonta la luna li porta con sé. Ma io continuo a sognare negli occhi tuoi belli, che sono blu come il cielo trapunto di stelle.